see me and the WO. Are you on mute? Can you hear us from the office?
We'd like to welcome you to this session. We are already late because of some technical hiccups, so we will not take much of your time. It's just to welcome you all. We'll not do the introductions. I think by now we know who is here, but if we don't know each other, let's spend time later on just to know who is who in this room. Otherwise, I hand it over to you, William, so that we can just start off. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuera, and everyone. Apologies indeed for those technical hitches. Trying to have a hybrid meeting, I guess, this early in the morning wasn't something that the hotel was able to fully be able to process, but here we are. I'll provide a few welcome remarks and then also pass it on to the chairperson of the Malawi Macadamia Association to also provide a few welcome remarks. Allow me to sit since this is a roundtable discussion. Firstly, just to welcome everyone and to thank you for being here very early this morning on a Monday. We don't take this for granted. We know that that kind of scheduling may not be the most ideal, but there were a few factors that actually led to that, not least also because one of our presenters is 9 hours ahead of us. So we had to have it at least this early in the morning, which is evening his time. Nonetheless, we're very happy to be welcoming everyone to this particular session. We have a cross-section of partners who are here. And we're happy that we're having this discussion also in the spirit of continuing to forge partnerships with all of you. We do have in the room, of course, the Malawi Macadamia Association and also some colleagues joining online. This is a key stakeholder for the MVC project with whom we look forward to very concrete and comprehensive engagement going forward. We also have the first cohort of our trainees for the Macadamia training that we offered and we continue offering actually since the past couple of weeks. Hopefully, we also have our colleagues from the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources who are another key partner. We do have on the line colleagues from the Growth Force Project, another key partner, and also our implementing partners, Trademark Africa, with whom we're implementing together the Malawi Trade and Investment Programme supported by the UK government. I won't belabor you with the project focus of MVC. I think at this point, most of us have engaged and we're aware of what the project is actually implementing. But just to say that, of course, we are focusing on 3 value chains: macadamia, mango, and mining. And in the macadamia sector, just like in mango, we're looking forward to having an industry-wide engagement, which we believe will be the most sustainable way of doing things. And so we're looking at the entire value chain from production, post-harvest handling, processing to export, but we're also looking at different farm sizes as well, so large, medium, and small. And this is the spirit within which the current study has also been done. We started with a benchmarking study, pretty much looking at the production and productivity of the estate sector. We then followed it up with this production system technical review, pretty much validating the benchmarking study, understanding the drivers for productivity, and making recommendations for what we call maybe an optimal production system. And we're also trying to tease that out at the 3 farm sizes as well. So production system for the large, medium, and small holders sectors, trying to see what that could potentially look like. So this is pretty much what's driving the study. We're pleased to be sharing the findings today. And we're also very keen to hear from you, your comments, validation of the findings, any insights as well that you can also share. This study is very important for our programming. It's going to form a very important part of what we'll be doing going forward. as a project with all of you, our key partners, and so we do look forward to your valuable feedback. With these few remarks, again, we look forward to some fruitful deliberations this morning and seeing how best we can jointly work together to take the academia sector forward. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
William, are we handing over to MMA to say something, or should we get started?
Thank you for hosting this event, and we are looking forward to or what it is you'll be presenting today. I'm sure it's relevant, and very much glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think now we'll go straight into the presentation of the findings on production systems, the technical review. That was the undertaking, and we have our colleagues online, Mr. Nicholas Evans and Dr. Wayne, that will give us the presentation. So let's pay attention. If we have got questions, let's note them. I think there'll be time for discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity to kind of share some of the findings of Wayne's study.
I think it's your time to start the presentation if you're ready. Thank you.
Okay. Yep, we're going to start now.
Yeah, we can't hear Nick. No, he's there, but
I can hear you clearly, Nick. It must be the Malawi.
I believe he can hear us, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Nick. Can you hear us?
I can hear you completely fine.
You can hear us fine.
Yeah.
He says you can hear. Seems William can pick up the voice.
But we can hear him too, William, so I can't hear.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so Wayne and I are very keen to share the results of his study with you. It's kind of in two parts. I will go through some of the work that we did on the benchmarking of the industry, and then also the main outcomes of his study from his field work. And then we'll discuss with you some of the ideas that have emerged from that and some of the focal points, okay? But overall, the purpose of this study was to validate some of the data of the benchmarking study. As William mentioned, really the purpose of the study was to identify what's driving productivity and quality, and which attributes of the production system are contributing to that. And this really helps prioritize where we should be focusing to really make this, okay? Also, obviously, as with a lot of technical things, it's not just about the research and development, it's about how you get that out there, how you get that incorporated into practice at farm level. So specifically, we look at that in this study, providing new platforms and structures with which to disseminate new technical information and raise technical standards across the whole industry. I think importantly, Wayne and I both have a kind of a hybrid sort of background in the Mac industry, both working with estates, kind of smaller farms and also smallholders. And because of that, we give special attention to the realization that different types of farms have got different needs and they present different contexts. And because of that, the overall production system will be a bit different. We need IT
support in Vincent, please.
Okay. So in terms of what Wayne did is, apart from running around the country like a maniac for 2 weeks, that we did a rapid benchmarking that was based on industry data that's submitted to the MMA on an annual basis. and we looked back, I think, 4 or 5 years for that. So we got 5 years worth of data from the MMA. This benchmarking approach very much emulates how the other major origins assess their productivity and performance. Australia do this, I think, every other year, and South Africa also share a lot of industry data so they can see what direction they're going in. And this really helps for farms to understand where they are on the spectrum of productivity and quality, and enables them to start questioning why. So I think it's a really useful tool. And then the survey that Wayne conducted with William covered all 3 regions. 4 estates were visited, 2 irrigated, 2 rain-fed, 4 mid-sized farm, 3 farmer organizations, and 8 smallholder farmers. So this gives quite a kind of, it covers all the, well, not all, but like a lot of the different types of farms that were there in the production system in Malawi. So in terms of the main findings of the benchmarking, I'm just trying to run through this quite quickly because I appreciate that we've started quite late this morning. Okay. Yeah, the benchmarking results, about 14,500 hectares was logged in the industry's data. Interestingly, 45% is immature, so under 6 years old. It just shows how much growth there is yet to come from the industry, from investments and hard work that's been put in by the industry in the last 5 or 6 years. Wayne and I think that this will more than double the volumes of crop coming out, largely because a lot of this immature crop is under irrigation and appears to be at much higher productivity levels as to the rain-fed crop. So there's going to be a sizable amount of additional crop coming through the system. Interestingly as well, there's the companies involved in the MAC sector at very different points of their productivity cycle and their company cycles. There was a very wide range of ratios of young to old, like mature trees. This is indicative of there's a large number of very young companies in the system, and there's a large number of companies that are turning over their crop at like 5 or 10% a year or something. So it's kind of very much in a state of transition and flux. The industry has gone through a rapid phase of growth. It's bringing online a much larger hectarage of trees. There's more companies in the system, so it's kind of going through a next phase of development, which is very exciting. So the crop area has grown by almost a quarter since 2020, which is really quite incredible. And most of this growth is focused in the central region, where over 2,000 hectares of capacity have been put in. And there's also appears to be an increasing shift to off-estate plantings as well. Now, that doesn't really appear fully in these statistics, which is from MMA members, so it represents 98% of the industry or what have you in terms of the formal trade. However, from anecdotal evidence that we've had as a project, there seems to be sizable off-estate plantings taking place. So again, this is another shift that the industry is becoming more pluralistic, with lots of different types of actors and potentially going into new growing areas. In terms of nut and husk yield, the rain-fed estates were ranging between 2 and 4 kilograms a hectare. Irrigated orchards were much higher, like between 4.4 and 7.5. And when you consider that the majority of the irrigated estates are far younger and still coming into full maturity, it's likely that this trend and this separation between irrigated and rain-fed will get wider. So yeah, despite the young age, irrigated estates are outperforming the rain-fed estates in terms of nut and husk, and also you'll see later nut in shell. It's interesting to point out that the smallholders at the tail end of the graph. Yes, this is what the benchmark looks like. It's basically the stats that are the data that's provided, listed in going down. And you can see there's quite, it's down in steps, and you can kind of generally see a trend that the irrigated estates are submitting the data at the top end of the graph. The rain-fed estates have got quite a big spread in the middle, but even if we just look at the spread on the rain-fed estates, they run from 2,000 to 4,000, so some are actually getting twice the productivity of others. So even within this, the spread is actually quite large, even within a single group. The smallholders come across as very, very low, and that's basically because their reported hectares are very large, and the volume of crop entering into the formal chain is low. So these stats, they don't really reflect the actual productivity of the smallholders. Some suggestions have been made to the industry of how to improve the statistical collection so it's more representative of the smallholder actual performance. But even when you account for that, it's still very, very low compared to the other actors. Nut in shell yield, very similar sort of trends. Irrigated is twice as productive as rain-fed. Some estates are achieving close to 5 tons of nut in shell a hectare. This is very good. And in fact, even those estates, they kind of report that once they go into a pruning cycle and probably absorb more stink bug damage, that will probably level off a long-term average around 4 tons a hectare. These are still pretty good. These are still really good results. And if they could be emulated across the industry a bit more broadly, certainly Malawi would sit pretty high on the productivity scale globally. There's lots of reasons why smallholder nut is not entering the formal chain. It's a high degree of household consumption, particularly if there's a small number of trees. That represents quite a high proportion of the crop that's actually produced. Theft is a major issue as well with the smallholders as well as the estates, even if it's a very small scale. There's weak harvesting systems, which means that there's not a large volumes of nut actually being brought in to the households and aggregated. And then the economics of aggregation kind of disincentivize marketing, in that if you've only got a small volume of nut, it costs quite a lot to actually get it to market, and therefore you may not even bother. Okay. But again, we see this big separation between rain-fed and irrigated. It's interesting that really we're only getting the first kind of like quality and like scale data from irrigated farms in the last like 4 or 5 years. So before that, it was really unknown how the impact of irrigation would have. So the industry has evolved significantly. In terms of a key quality index, monitoring point, sound kernel recovery. Again, there's quite a large spread within the industry, ranging from 35 to 20. Again, we see this trend on irrigated farms because they're younger, they've got less stink bug issues endemically. Probably trees are probably less stressed as well. So they generally have been achieving over 30% sound kernel recovery as a group, and as high as 35. Rain-fed estates are a lot more consistent at about 25-26% over the 4 years of the study. But this is quite a big spread. I mean, it's not surprising you get a spread of like 10 or 15% within an industry. But considering the number of actors, it is quite a big sort of spread. And it's also interesting to note that this kind of like early phases of the development of a farm, often they get higher sound kernel recoveries and lower reject levels because they haven't established the pest populations there that are going to curtail their quality later on. So we've used this data in a number of ways. Firstly, to kind of develop these kind of like farm yield models, which help us plan out and help medium scale farms plan their investments more accurately, project revenue from the farm and productivity of the farm more accurately. So we've set up 5 different scenarios for macadamia, just low input, low output, sort of like a smallholder scenario, probably under the current sort of smallholder conditions, commercial rain-fed, commercial irrigated, which are kind of like these mid-sized farms with staff, and then professional rain-fed, professional irrigated that you see on the estates. Okay, and that models out the farm over 20 years and is kind of a tool to explore different options of how to develop the farm and how to structure the investment in a farm. I think this could probably be scaled down to work like a quite small scale, and also to maybe aggregate at a farm or organization level to look at the economies of aggregation as well. All right, so I think I'm going to hand over to Wayne at this point to maybe kind of have his main observations of the production system that he's kind of made. I'm going to be operating the slides, Wayne, so if you want the next one or if you want to take over, you just say, okay?
No, next slide, mate. Okay, well, it was an interesting rush trip around, and I apologise for not seeing everybody, but that was a bit hard. It was good to actually see such a widespread and talk to a lot of the medium-sized farmers again, who are quite an interesting area to work with, and are going to become a significant part of the industry fairly soon. I think there's been some good success stories coming through, such as alternative planting systems to increase productivity. That's higher density plantings basically, and things like tramline planting, which is yielding very well, although it requires pruning, more intensive management and so forth, and works better under irrigation, obviously. Off-estate plantings. These are areas sort of ranging up to 20, 30 hectares and possibly more. One guy in the north's got over 100 hectares, although it's not particularly well managed. These are a growing area of the industry, and they're basically plantings done by Malawians with capital, and they are going to become a part of the industry which is fairly significant and probably increasing in significance. And they also bring a different idea to things because they come from different backgrounds, and they won't all take a standard approach. So that'll be interesting from a R&D perspective, but we'll also get some good information out of that. The new areas, such as further in the north and north around Kasungu over the border into Zambia, they're demonstrating that there's a lot more land in Malawi that's actually viable, and also the land between Lilongwe and Kasungu, for example, at a bit higher altitude. That's really demonstrating there's significant growth potential in Malawi if you can access that land and have the capital to develop it. So that's quite exciting. Innovation in post-harvest systems to maximise the value, and macadamia is a crop where you have to capture the crop early, maintain the quality, and then maximise the value from that quality by processing. So innovative post-harvest systems such as those at Dinesh and East Africa plantations and so forth, Tushar's place, they got a very good system put in place there, as the photo indicates. That's really good to see because that captures the quality and maintains the quality. The other thing which is happening with plantings now and being forced upon people, whether they like it or not, is really increased use of data. So the more data you have and the better data you have, the better decisions you can make, and that's quite important. Thanks, Nick. Obviously, there's some pretty consistent constraints across the industry. Theft and bug are the most important and severe constraints, and they really are industry-wide. Even the smallholders are reporting increased theft, partly due to hunger and partly due to opportunistic issues. The theft is, it's organised. It's an organised crime on large estates and close to the cities and so forth. There's plenty of petty theft. There's always been petty theft. People like to eat the nut. That's, but that's not where the main nut is going. Nut is being exported, and that is a problem. So that needs to be addressed on an industry-wide basis. Bug is essentially a research problem, and we'll get on a bit more about that later. Neither of these kind of, at the moment, has a holistic way of addressing them. and that's a problem. Both are specific to Malawi and need work on that here. There are clear pathways to increase productivity through higher density plantings, irrigation, and investing in skills, also in varieties, and reducing losses for a variety of reasons. Thanks, Nick. So the main challenges are lack of control, measures for stink bug that are economic and viable, and large tree size, of course, has a big impact on this. Theft affects all sections of the industry, aging tree stock, particularly on the older estates, large trees, declining productivity and eroding margins because you can't control bugs so easily. Some of these have a new investment cycle, require a new investment cycle, and that's happening on some places, although not on others. We have to start looking at marketing further down the track because production is going to double, and that's going to, lead to the need to sell the product rather than relying just on sending it to South Africa and them doing the marketing for it. And the existing processors in Malawi are doing a good job of marketing their own product and some contract processing, and they've got a well-established market network, and that's great. But they can't absorb all the new production which is coming online. So there will need to be increased processing capacity for that reason. Varietal selection is a big issue, and there's a lot of data available in Malawi, but it's not disaggregated by variety, and it hasn't been properly tabulated and assessed. So we need to look at that. The thing about macadamia is they produce differently. Different varieties perform quite differently in different locations. So 50 k's up the road in a slightly different area with a little bit lower altitude or a bit higher altitude, it might be in a rain shadow or get extra rain, all has a big influence on varieties. The one key factor that came out of variety trials in Australia, which went way down the east coast, basically said, you've got to select macadamias for your area. And they spent 20 years assessing varieties in many locations. And the key thing to come out of it is you can't rely on almost any one variety in any one location. So that's a pretty tough gig to deal with across the board. But Malawi has a range of varieties which are performing well. And if you speak to people who are turning over some of their older orchards and stuff, they're all moving to a different varietal mix to what was there originally, based on their observations of what's doing well and what's not doing well. We have to collect that data, analyse that data properly, and make better recommendations. We also have to then start the process of developing better adapted varieties within Malawi for Malawian conditions, and that we'll get onto that later. The medium and smallholder farmers, of course, are under financial stress, a lot of them. And, we spoke to a number of medium-sized farmers who kind of planted macadamias on a bit of a whim. And now they're going, well, okay, that's nice. What do we do now? And I think there's quite a lot of scope there. It's a developing section of the industry. And you've got to applaud the enthusiasm, but also temper the expectations to some extent because they will need a fair bit of support to make it viable. Smallholders, there's an awful lot of smallholders out there and they do a great job of eating macadamias, and that's really valuable nutrition-wise, and they've got healthy kids, etc., healthier kids. In terms of commercialisation, though, logistics are a big problem because you have to aggregate and you have to have enough scale to make aggregation work. And within and on the farm, you have to have enough trees to make it worthwhile to actually put in the effort and the inputs to make it viable. Thanks, Nick. So alternative planting systems enables higher productivity by area and an earlier revenue stream. If you look at the tramline type systems that the Tropha have employed, they're returning much higher yield at a younger age. Sure, they're going to need more pruning. Yes, they need more input, but your return on capital is a lot quicker. So under irrigation, there's a strong economic case for that, despite the capital required. If you're investing the capital, then you really need to, be prepared to do a high density planting and get a lot better outcome. Now 8x3, 0.5, or even closer, will give you a larger number of trees. It's pretty basic that if you have more number of trees fruiting at the same time, you'll get more nuts, providing they don't crowd each other. So pruning becomes much more important, but that's an adaptation thing and a training thing. So, you know, the yields can be achieved. Smaller clones such as A4 and 791, you know, they've got a higher input requirement. 791 flowers anytime because it's a hybrid, and that's, you know, a parent issue. But they also demonstrate the productivity that can be achieved when you plant them in high densities. And that's very important because when we're selecting new varieties, we want to be planting at high densities because we want that high yield at an early age. And you're going to have to rethink the way you're growing macadamia. They may not be a 30-year crop. They will not be a 30-year crop at very high densities. It'll be a 15 to 20-year crop maximum. And that's not a problem because you'll have made your money and you can move on to the new varieties which are coming out, which will be higher yielding anyway. So land is a constraint on existing particular estates in the south. The smallholders generally are restricted by land, especially in the south. Some of the smallholders in the north have a lot more land and they can do a better job. But we also see smallholders in the south who started out with a few trees and they come and ask us, can we get more trees? Because we know we need more trees to make it viable to grow macadamia. Thanks, Nick. In Australia, the big thing in macadamia production is soil health and getting away from herbicides, etc. That's become the main focus of the industry development because a lot of farms went into decline there by using herbicides, not enough mulch, older trees, larger trees, not enough sun reaching the ground. So you can call it climate smart, you can call it a whole range of things, but basically it's just good orchard management. Because if you don't do that in the long term, your trees go into decline earlier and you don't get the productivity. Pruning is a big part of that. Varietal selection is a part of that. Maintaining tree size at a much smaller scale, starting pruning much earlier, thinking differently about pruning. Don't prune up from the floor, orchard floor, prune down from the top. Some pretty straightforward ideas on that. But soil health in the long term is what really maintains your productivity. And on non-irrigated farms, it reduces the impact of drought and it maintains yield and maintains resilience within the orchard for a much longer period of time. Thanks, Nick. Now, the estates have been growing macadamia for a long time. They've got a lot of knowledge and a lot of management skill in that area. You know, they've certainly did very well when the prices were high. Everybody complains when the price goes down, and that's completely understandable. But the estates are also facing risks, particularly with you know, the lower prices, the bugs and the theft and aging trees particularly on estates, mostly in the south. Climate risks, it's unpredictable, some of the climate risks, but increasing temperature in particular and increasing drought frequency are big problems for macadamia. Macadamia is not a high temperature crop. It'll cope with drought very well, but it affects productivity moving forward. One big drought affects productivity for the next 2 or 3 years because of the way the tree responds and the way it closes down under high temperatures and doesn't produce photosynthate and doesn't store photosynthate, and then you don't get yield. The industry in the south is quite well catered for by processing, but the new estates further north in the central and the northern region don't have processing, and that's a challenge moving forward. The IPM system on many estates has broken down basically because of bug pressure, and we really need to address that with a research program. And we also need more skilled staff across the board because we just need that extra talent there. If we don't have that extra talent there, it makes it much harder to manage estates and much harder to address issues. And simple things like bug scouting and monitoring, if you don't do that well, you miss things and then you miss crop. Thanks, Nick. The mid-sized farms, they're using their own investment, so you've got to give them credit for that. they're going to have a diversity in approaches. The scale will be anything from 10 hectares to probably 100 hectares. A lot of them are moving into new production areas away from the traditional areas, and we saw some of these in Gender. One interesting farm there, which wasn't part of the Sable group, so the Sable planting, was a really interesting farm in the way they're doing it, although they're getting some really strange advice. Others, they're such as some in the kind of West Vumbi area, really keen to plant macadamia, although they don't know very much about it, but they're keen to be involved, and they will be very good partners in the long term. They have a few problems in that they don't understand the post-harvest need at this point, and that's going to be sort of, you know, a problem in terms of being able to manage their crop when it starts coming on, because they won't have a long time. Time passes pretty quickly, and the tree grows fast. So, you know, they're going to have problems there. So access to information and good advice for that group is going to be critical. But they're very important, I think, in other areas for employment, for example, because they will provide employment in places where there isn't much employment, and they're going to need a lot of support across the board. Thanks, Nick. Smallholders. Well, they've been a conundrum for a long time, and people are always talking about how smallholders should be doing this and should be doing that and should be exporting and whatnot, and really they're battling uphill to get there, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. Macadamia is not an easy crop to grow. The tree will do well in a lot of places, but it will not necessarily produce well. They've had a lot of false starts in terms of being told if you have 5 trees, you'll make a fortune. We think 100 tree minimum, probably 400 or 500 trees is really the number of trees a smallholder needs to actually do it well and to devote the time to that crop. That's difficult for those smallholders. Many of them just don't have the land to do that. So there are problems in that. They do have some small advantages in terms of things like marketing opportunities by selling a story such as fair trade. Eating macadamia is very good for their kids and so forth. So they're kind of, you know, good points. They've always suffered because they haven't had a good supply of grafted trees. They haven't had good dedicated agronomic support, and they haven't had good post-harvest systems. So even if they're growing good quality nuts, they don't necessarily capture that quality and maintain it. And as an aside, when I first came to Malawi way back in 1989, the best quality nuts I assessed in the first 12 months actually came from a smallholder farm. He got the best kernel recovery and the best saleable kernel percentage of anything we assessed. That included all the estates at the time. Now, you know, it's a single data point in a big data set, but it demonstrates that smallholder farmers, and particularly those with a few more trees and those willing to put in the time, can do a good job. So we shouldn't discount them out of hand, but we know there's 11,000 or something smallholder farmers out there, but the majority of those are never going to enter a you know, export value chain under the current state, but a lot of them could enter an export value chain with the right support and some encouragement. So I think there's some opportunities here. You can call them opportunities or you can call them issues, but we need to start managing bug populations differently. We need to understand bugs a lot better. You know, bugs have become endemic in orchards and they know what they're doing. They're smart little creatures and they become habituated to macadamia, and we've got to unhabituate them somehow. That's not going to be easy. The older orchards, we know some of the older farms are turning over their orchards and moving to smaller type trees and higher density. And we need smaller, higher productive varieties for those situations to make it more viable. And remember, by the time we get a new variety in 6 to 10 years, some of the existing plantings that have been planted in the last 5 to 10 years will need to be start to be turned over. So don't think just because you're doing it now, you've got a planting that's only 5 or 10 years old. You don't have to think about turning your orchard over, because you do have to think about it in the future. Soil health is very important. Maintaining fertility, maintaining the carbon levels in the soil,
Okay. Do you want me to give you a break and do this first bit of the next section, Wayne? And then you can take over the R&D bit.
If you like, mate.
Yeah. I think just as an observation, something that we were talking about last week is that there's an area that has been planted to smallholder nut, like around Gender, so like South Mazimba. This was always an area that we always felt was kind of like it was too cloudy, it was too cold. But now looking at it again with the kind of changes in climate and there's less pronounced cloudy phases of the year, the trees are doing really well. So it really does demonstrate that we are in a shifting climate, and this means that we need to be adaptable. And part of that is to be on top of a lot of these orchard systems that build resilience and reduce the vulnerability is going to be really important for the long-term success of the industry. So this is why I think we're kind of keen to get this sort of orchard management approach front and center, because it enables a whole pile of different techniques to come together and adapt to what's really needed in an individual location. So we really wanted to not just talk about challenges, but to actually work out, well, what we can kind of do about them. I think it's firstly, we should recognize that there is work that's already ongoing, and there's a lot of things the industry is doing well and is doing correctly. So I think for us as MVC, we want to enhance this momentum that's already in the industry. And the MMA, which was kind of evolved out of the Tree Nut Growers Association 3 or 4 years ago, is already restarting a lot of work on technical issues that kind of needs to be consolidated and supported further for it to have the impact it needs to. So MMA is arranging sort of technical events, it's running field days, usually alongside industry meetings, but also on the side as well. A lot of the farms are currently getting expertise from South Africa, particularly on new investments and stuff. That's partly because they're kind of using different techniques, incorporating irrigation, which weren't historically part of the Malawi production system, but now are. I think that may be evolving with a second generation of irrigated farms now appearing. There's more expertise in the country now and experience in the country that could maybe reduce the dependence on external consultants. Having said that, bringing in ideas from other origins is really useful. But most of the estates, they have in-house training programs. They are sort of some of the more progressive estates are kind of doing R&D at a small scale. They're trialing things, observing things, but for the real value of those investments to be brought out, it'd be much better to put it inside a kind of program where those results could be disseminated. The trials could be designed in a kind of a robust manner. At the moment, there's a lot of technical resources out there for macadamia from various origins and sources. A lot of people are assembling these themselves or doing independent research. I was really quite amazed in the medium scale farmers that we've been working with so closely over the last month or so, that the number of them that are just doing their own research and finding their own resources, their own manuals, they're watching videos. So there's clearly a hunger for kind of resources and knowledge materials, and maybe like to collect them in a single location. But this also has led to like a kind of limited standardization, because with a wide range of sources from a wide range of origins, people are not getting a complete picture of what's going on. And because of that, there's no real standardization of advice. Whenever, and I think Wayne, maybe on your trip, you maybe saw this, there's a lot of different spacings, varietal mixes, intercrops. There's a lot of different variables out there, which makes it difficult to give kind of more generic, straightforward kind of advice. Yeah, so in terms of the gaps we've kind of identified, is that there's an absence of sort of like a one-stop shop, somewhere to go where you could get information on nutritional stuff and pests, establishment, how to plan the farm, maybe some tools and stuff like this. It's all very fragmented. So one thing is to kind of like bring things together, and we kind of seen that in the medium scale farms, is that people are planting without really planning for post-harvest, or they're planting without a clear plan on irrigation, for example. So they're kind of operating in a slight information vacuum, which I think MVC could kind of help fill. There's clearly, it's not just that people are making bad decisions, it's also that their options are very limited. And particularly in the small and the medium-sized farms, access to planting material is actually quite a big issue, not in terms of numbers of trees, but also being able to order specific clones in specific numbers to be delivered on a specific day. And this is because I think there's only a handful of commercial scale nurseries in the country. And this is definitely one of the issues that you have with the decentralized nursery system that's under a lot of strain. There's a large demand for trees, for cheap trees. And because of that, nurseries really struggle to produce the right clones in the right numbers to meet that demand. And because of that, you get a large number of suboptimal clones getting planted out because that's all they have left in the nursery. So this is something that really can, if you want to address varietal issues, you have to address the nursery issues. That's and you see that in estate, one of the main things that I see differently from the way the estates and everyone else is doing it is the systematic way they're planting. They know which lines are what clones. They can monitor the productivity from that. It's easier to manage the trees, it's easier to manage the fields if it's systematically done from day one. And these are things you can't change later, right? So this is something really important to get right. And often people are making these decisions before they have experience of growing the crop. So they can't do it from an informed perspective. People are mad keen to plant trees, but then there's not so much focus on actually how to commercialize this crop. And that's another big departure between the estates and all the other actors, is that the estates are very much focused on when revenue will come in, how revenue will come in, and how aggressively that comes in. So that's clearly a big gap and differentiation between the two production systems. The estates are very much revenue focused. Everyone else plants trees and then expects the market just to be there, which is not the case. Not with macadamia, which is purely, your access to market is to do with quality over productivity. Okay. William, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to check how many more slides we have to go. There's some members in the room that have some time constraints, so sorry that we started late, but just to get a sense of how many more slides and how much more time we'll need. Thanks.
We've got like 5 or 6 more slides and we'll run through them quick. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. We'll provide the slides. I mean, some of the stuff on the next couple of slides is quite detailed. We won't have time to go through it in much detail, really. Okay. So we're starting to kind of like basically as a project start to look at how to kind of like work with partners and to get these kind of resources together. We think that the MMA website is obviously a go-to location for everyone in the industry, so it needs to be kind of enhanced through this kind of work. We're thinking of producing a kind of landing page which collates all the information on macadamia in one location to kind of have a go-to resource. Revising manuals, having themed industry seminars and field days. So working with the MMA to bring in experts and to identify themes and to develop content for those type of events. And like, but another thing that I think we need to really think about how extension and advisory can be done on a sustainable basis. I think many of us in the room would have had experience of extension systems previously, and we know that they're very expensive to run. And we know they're very time consuming and they can be of limited impact. So we think that having kind of alternative approaches, leveraging things like WhatsApp groups and building communities of people where it can share challenges, solutions, like seasonally based things can be promoted, could be really, really useful. And from just running a couple of groups for less than a month, the mid-sized farmer ones are really, really active, and this is a good way of engaging people. So we've kind of designed a bit of a concept of the different kind of like actors. We think that a lot of trials should be done on estates because they provide the commercial context and under sound management to increase participation from educational institutions such as Luana, and to create stronger linkages between them and the estates, provide some ability to design trials effectively so that the results can be interpreted, and to kind of like develop these kind of like knowledge resources. Wayne and I and Luana and are also working with Gala and Growth Polls to kind of look at setting up this kind of like experimental farm for macadamia. There's a whole pile of things that we can do on that sort of space, trialing smallholder production systems, also potentially doing some R&D specifically there in kind of like a on university kind of like trial farm, which I think could be really beneficial for the industry as a whole. Also provides a learning environment for people to get more experience of macadamia when they're doing their education, and to like work jointly to implement R&D and research projects. Okay, skip that one. Yeah, we also sort of realized that our R&D to be valued, like, and to generate value for the industry needs to involve not just the farmers but also the service providers to them to keep their advice and their knowledge up to date. So we think that kind of like getting a directory of service providers could really help, particularly medium scale farms, sort of like access the type of services that they need to be successful. Inputs are chronically underutilized in the non-estate sector, and irrigation is in big demand. So, and nursery stock, as I mentioned before, it's very difficult to get the right varieties in the right numbers at the right amount of time. So Wayne, maybe you take these last couple of slides on the R&D.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think we need a partnership approach between estates, input dealers and projects, etc. As Nick mentioned. There's a lot of work we can do with a bit of supervision to get very good outcomes. Bug control is a great example because some really good work's been done on that in the past in Malawi, but it hasn't really been taken forward. We need to do that. There's a lot of good information out there. It needs adapting to Malawian conditions, and we need the linkages to training institutions, academia, etc. for sustainability. Thanks, Nick. Quickly on the sort of stuff we need to do on varieties, for example, some research. People get the worry when you say we're going to do breeding and research, but the technology has changed so much that, and a lot of work's been done behind the scenes, which most people are not aware of. We can now test a lot of things at the University of Pretoria, and we can start selecting varieties in 6 or 7 years, whereas before we were looking at sort of 10 to 20 years. Now, it's really important we do this. under the local conditions. And I won't go through the whole slide, but I've thought about this a lot over the years and put in place things that at the University of Pretoria from Australia, which will allow us to do this in a way we couldn't do before and at a very much lower cost. Thanks, Nick. Now, stink bug, you know, everybody's got a macadamia farm knows about stink bug. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. Some excellent work was done in the past looking at the chemistry, sorry, not the chemistry, the biology of stink bug. We now need to take that work further forward. Gina Thornycroft has done some work, and a long time ago, Mr. Soko did some excellent work on this. We need to combine their work, repeat some of the work, and come up with new approaches and new alternatives that don't involve just a very large spray program on a 21-day rotation. So once again, FABI at the University of Pretoria, they've done a lot of research on bugs, and we had actually had the opportunity to get them up here before COVID, and that fell through, unfortunately. We need to do a state-based trials and probably some trials on some medium and small farmers as an alternative. We need to look at alternative approaches, the biologicals, fungi, parasites, a whole range of things, because currently bug control is not working very well, and it's way too expensive, and it's not available to medium and small scale farmers because they don't have the ability to spray. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, I think stink bug has kind of emerged as probably the largest technical challenge to the industry in terms of both reducing productivity and reducing quality. So the losses are significant. I mean, the farms that it affects in an individual season a lot more, but it's not uncommon to hear 20-30% losses, which is very significant, right? So, I mean, something to bear in mind is this isn't just Malawi, right? The complex of bugs in Southern Africa is different to Australia and to other origins. And because of this, it's specific to Southern Africa, and the South Africans aren't managing it, and the Kenyans aren't managing it. So this is something that's of regional importance and a focus. So it's worthwhile bearing in mind that this is not just about Malawi, it's about the whole industry in Southern Africa. Just to say that Malawi has tried, I think, almost everything possible. So we need to start to look at new ways of managing this issue. Okay. All right. So that's what we have. So be very keen to have any feedback or ideas or thoughts that our work has kind of stimulated in you. So maybe we hand over to William to maybe try and see if they coordinate anything from the room or.
Presentation. I think, yeah, we should open it up for inputs. Maybe we can start with Jimmy, if you have any immediate reflections on the presentation. I think there's a mic on that side.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think we covered a lot of detail in a short time. We were a little bit under time pressure as well, but well done. I think it's there. I think people can look back at it, and I think it will form a basis for a lot of discussion. You know, there's a lot of different aspects and points that people, whoever's interested in certain elements, can come back and revisit. I think that one of the themes that is emerging, maybe maybe more than one, is that there will be, we would like to see new entrants, these, especially on the medium size to, let's say, small, medium, and large new entrants. That's a sector in Malawi that, as the association, we'd like to see that grow, but we'd like to see it kick off on a good footing, so that let's say the new entrants are well informed on site selection. So I don't see enough about site selection. there was a brief mention that Zimba might be good. But I do think that the sooner we focus on site selection to guide potential investors, farmers, the better. So site selection is a big one for me. The next thing is, where do farmers go to get seedlings? Where do they go to get agronomy? So that's the next, just plotting steps forward. Am I in the right place? Do I have the right piece of land? Where do I go for seeding? Where do I go for agronomy? And then where do I go for fertilizer? Where do I go for chemicals? Will follow. So having clarity on that just part of how we can facilitate new entrants would be important. Then where will I sell my nuts? I think, after all, why would I do anything other than for the reason that at some point I'll have economic return? So we need to make that economic return very clear from the outset. Say you're embarking on a long path, you will begin to harvest maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and make it clear to the investor, this site is good, this site is not good. So I do think we need to develop a narrative that will encourage, but also give a realistic, first instruction to potential entrants. So I'd like that message to emerge. The aspect of markets and potentially how we take all of our crop, the nuts, whether they're from large, medium, or small, where do we put them, how do we process them, how do we maintain a Malawi quality image that we have. Malawi is well respected for its quality at the moment, much more so than our competing Kenya, who went on this smallholder path before really putting in place all the elements that would bring them to a more successful outcome. So how do we make sure Malawi gets off on the right foot? And how do we make sure that our farmers have somewhere to sell their nuts and those nuts reach the global markets? So that's a critical element that I hope Malawi value chains will help us basically strategize around and solve. So that's what I'm hoping. So I think that's enough for me. Those are the big issues or elements that I picked up. There's more, but we'll cover those as we go along. Thank you.
Yeah, we didn't include marketing in there. We did mention processing. We didn't include marketing because we knew we had pretty serious time constraints, which got worse. But that's taken on board. I mean, the site selection and so forth, there is information out there, but it isn't consolidated. And realistically, we need to start looking at these new areas more effectively, as Nick said, about gender and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an area where the information base needs to be updated and improved quite a lot. Yeah. So thanks for that.
Yeah, so I think I completely agree. Site selection has always been very high priority for like smallholder site selection as well, because obviously they're not going to have irrigation probably installed. So obviously site selection is even more important. I think what Wayne was mentioning about the analysis of the varietal data that's already in the country, I think can really help define site selection and make site-specific clone recommendations, kind of akin to how they've done it in Australia, which they have like a list of clones for each for each growing area that they recommend. We could maybe look at that as well. On the markets, yeah, I'd just like to concur with Wayne. We were actually going to put a third section into this presentation, but we felt that markets and quality to attain markets and like that origin and reputation is almost like a separate themed event. So I'm hoping that we'll have something specifically focused on that. As Wayne's focus for this was more the production system, so the agronomy, obviously there's strong linkages to the marketing there, but we wanted to have a think and focus in on the marketing as a distinct priority in its own right. Because obviously if there's things like on processing, there's things like on markets, there's things on clonal selection which feed into that, which are commercial. So if this is more like the agronomy side, we wanted to have something that's more commercially focused. So I'm hoping that we'll try and arrange something in the not too distant future on that. Okay. there any more?
Sorry,
Is-
I just want to come back to site selection and why I honed in on it. We are getting a lot of phone calls from friends and people who are reaching out to say, look, I want to embark on macadamia production. Right now, we have people calling us from Balaka saying, can I plant in Balaka, can I plant Salima, can I plant Lakeshore? I mean, all I can say is I don't think you can, and I don't think you should. We would not like to disappoint farmers. You don't want to put a crop in the ground and find 4 years later, 5 years later, that's just not doing what it should do. That's one thing. The other thing is, the quality aspects, the yield aspects related to site selection. So, and I do appreciate that clone selection relative to site is important, but it's almost a detail compared to just not planting in a place that is unsuitable from a point of view of temperatures, climate, and soil. So I don't think it's very difficult for us. In fact, it should be a rapid, even desktop let's say, project to begin with, to sit and work out where we would say don't plant over here, and you are likely to have success here. Now we don't know because we can't go on, like macadamia does well, let's say above 1,000 meters across Malawi. But if it's 1,000 meters and over 1,000 millimeters of rain, depending on distribution, it's probably going to do well. So we can put our minds together within the industry and draw from our experience and say, look, this is our best guess at the moment, or let's say our best estimate of sites that would be rewarding to an investor. And outside of these sites, you're taking risk, and especially as you go lower down, you're taking more risk. So I don't think I don't want to delay the exercise, and I don't think it's the first round of getting some very high level results that we can quickly communicate to potential entrants is difficult. So I'd like to get that over the line quickly.
Thank you. That's well noted. I think one issue that, as you were raising that, I was also thinking about is the coordination that is actually required to get this information to prospective entrants. And I think probably having it done within the association and then, other people being able to converse with the association, whether they're already members or not, I think that would be probably the best channel. And we can certainly, I think, as a team, sit with you and try and see how quickly that can also be done to at least have an overall mapping at least of the country, and then saying, okay, these are the areas that probably someone could do well with this particular crop, and then find a way of communicating that, I think, through the association. So that's well noted. Toera, do you want to continue with the facilitation? I see there's a hand online. I think Dr. Griffin Chipendo, please do come in.
So I'm Griffin Chipula from Luana. Thank you for the nice presentation and the insights that you have provided. I wanted to know whether you had time to consult the Lunyangwa Research Station, because these guys have been working with Macadamia in terms of research for some time, and maybe whatever they are doing there would have fed into your presentation in terms of research and development. The second question is issues to do with the funding for research. I know working with Macadamia for research is a bit expensive, because firstly sourcing the seedlings, the treatments, all the other agronomic practices. I would have loved to hear more if there are opportunities for research funding for the academia and also for the government research stations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We didn't have time to go to Lunyangwa. It's been a few years since I've been there. It's probably been underfunded for quite a while, so that I'm not sure what they have done in recent years. In terms of other macadamia research and funding, I mean, obviously we need to get funding from different sources to do macadamia research. Nick and I are certainly looking at that. And William, we had a good meeting with Luna, when I was there, and I think William's been following that up since I haven't been there. Macadamia research tends to be longer term, and that's a disadvantage. It tends to be a bit more expensive because you have to have access to trees, and that's why we're proposing that a lot of the work be done on estates where they can do a fair bit of in-kind work, such as looking after the trial site when researchers are not actually there. There's no easy solutions to research in macadamia. It just does take time, and we have to work around that. So I don't pretend to have an appropriate answer for everything in the questions, but we're certainly working towards getting further research funds. And next time we're in Mzuzu, we'll go and have a look at Liangyangwa again and see what they're doing, or if they have been doing anything for some time. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd also like to add that by establishing new blocks of macadamia, that's good in the medium to long term. But if you want to kickstart research linkages in macadamia, it's probably best to do it with ongoing establishments and create linkages with the estates, because they'll provide a experimental basis. Also, in Wayne's work, he's talked to a number of estates about running trials on their sites, and there's many estates are happy to run trials. That could also share some of the costs. Obviously, a lot of the costs you're talking about are land, trees based, inputs based, which if that could be covered by a partner, that could be a more efficient way of doing it. It wouldn't be perfect for everything. I agree, but yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any comments?
Actually, yeah, Nick just took the words out of my mouth in terms of the different possibilities for funding. I think as we were going around, just to confirm, there were some estates that were also saying that they could actually provide resources towards, R&D, engagements going forward. And I think that's one section of funds. Obviously, there'll also be need for, looking at what government is actually doing, what is actually programmed, and then other public sources of funding as well. We do continue, of course, talking to different partners to try and see how we can mobilize, funding in a consolidated sort of approach towards the R&D. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? Yes.
Thank you. My question is basically to do with the intercropping damaging macadamia, especially for smallholder farmers. I was wondering if there's work being done in developing short varieties that can occupy at least smaller space than the top varieties that we have, so that our farmers continue to put in intercrops for food security. As we all know that the land we have will not expand. That I would be implementing it. Thank you.
Well, smallholders generally are quite innovative in terms of intercropping, and we've seen, as we mentioned earlier in the presentations, intercrops of a whole range of types used in macadamia. There's two issues or constraints on the issues you raised. One is that a lot of our current varieties are too big, and we know there are smaller varieties, and that's part of the varietal development program would be to develop much smaller varieties right down to dwarfing, because that would allow smallholders to do a much better job of management. Now, that's a complicated issue in its own right, but we have started that process a long time ago behind the scenes, and that work is progressing. The second thing is that intercrops don't necessarily damage the trees, depending on how it's done. They can damage depending on how it's done and so forth. We would like to do more research on that in terms of more economic drivers for intercropping, such as things that are going to get a return, as well as the subsistence type crops, such as maize. It's a complicated area to work in, and it does take time to do it. So it's certainly not, it is on the radar and has not been forgotten. And that's part of the work with Carla and Lunar on that. It's actually an interesting area to work in, but it's also an area where you don't get results in a short period of time. But so far, many farmers have been quite innovative in what they've grown in their crops, everything from pineapples to coffee to maize. And, you know, the farmers we saw at Gender, for example, the smallholder farmers, they've got wide spacings, they're multiple cropping, everything from finger millet through to maize to sweet potato to groundnut. So, I mean, it's occurring already, and it could certainly be enhanced with a smaller tree size, and we're working on that as well.
And I think this also highlights the diversity that you need in the production system, because there are smallholders who want to have a macadamia orchard, and there's people who want to plant a macadamia orchard and intercrop for 5 years but then switch it over to macadamia. There's also people who want a permanent space to do intercropping. So there are multiple different ways of doing it, which, yeah, all of which there are examples of in the country. I think intercrops intercrops are presented as they offer a second income for the field, which is true, but there are sacrifices to be made with an intercrop. You get less area for both macadamia and the intercrop. So, I mean, where I've seen farmers economically benefiting the most from intercrops is when they do something quite intensive like chilies or paprika or something horticultural, which is obviously like a high return and a small area, but there's loads of different ways of doing it. So yeah, I think for intercrops it's about getting the principles right. Okay. Just so you know, I put 2 suitability maps in the chat, and then I put a link. I put a PDF document, and that was, I think, released. That paper was released, I think, about 18 months ago, from a Malawian UK-based PhD researcher. And that's probably the most detailed suitability study there's ever been of macadamia in the country. So in terms of having that kind of quite clear guidance as to these areas are not suitable, these areas are suitable. But basically it's the lower Shiri, the Shiri Valley and the Lakeshore. They're the areas that are just too hot and too dry, even with irrigation. Okay. So we can already start to make some of those recommendations.
Yeah, climate change has meant that altitude is becoming much more important. The length of the dry season is very important. So once macadamia was successful at 600 meters, it's now creeping up more towards 900 meters. And the same as for the length of the dry season, you really need 1200 millimeters of rain if you can get it spread over 6 or 7 months with a dry season of no more than 5 months. Now, irrigation, of course, changes that, and you know, there's variabilities within that, but that's sort of the general range.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other contributions from those that are online regarding the question about special varieties? Okay, thank you. Any comments from you?
Not for now.
My name is Kubo Dwabo. I'm from the Malawi Macadamia Association. I just wanted to find out how many smallholder farmers and medium-sized farmers you're working with, and what's your categorization of small and categorization of medium. Thank you.
Did you hear that, Dick?
Yeah. How many? So I think there's about 40 medium scale farmers that we've got the details of which there's I think 12 or 15, I think 12 attended the training that we ran a couple of weeks ago on farm planning. So that cohort, and there will be a second cohort going through that training shortly. The numbers are however many people come forward. We're quite happy to work with people. So if anyone knows medium scale farmers who are not currently on our lists, then please direct them to us. In terms of the numbers of smallholders, our program, as some of you know, kind of initiated with more of an estate and medium scale farmer focus. We are going to be working with smallholders. We're still developing that area, but it's likely to be Himacol. You know, we've talked with Sable about working with their smallholders, and we were involved in a meeting at Gala a few weeks ago because they're looking to also develop smallholders. So we're looking to kind of like support work with smallholders as well. Not fully defined yet. In terms of where you put the boundaries, I mean, this is endless debate. I would say that a smallholder, I would say the medium scale farmer starts from about 3 hectares up to, I don't know, it's a very broad church. So our definition for our project goes up to about 100 hectares. Yeah, because at 3 hectares, 4 hectares, you start to have the economy of scale to be able to have equipment, to be able to have staffing, to use inputs. Below that, you require very different kind of services, and you work at a different economy. So I would say that. So you could also use numbers of trees. So we use like a dual definition, which is area stroke number of trees. So we work on about 750 trees, I think it is, to be defined as a medium scale farmer. Because obviously it's different planting densities, right? So if you just use areas, then someone may sound really big, but doesn't have very many trees. Yeah. And that also kind of echoes like in Kenya and in West Africa on tree crops, you have this distinction between people growing over about 2 or 3 hectares. Okay, and anyone less than that is obviously smallholder. Okay, if that answers your question. But I don't like to put completely fixed boundaries. In some ways, it's to do with the approach. Like, for example, on Max, 3 hectares irrigated, professionally managed looks very different to 3 hectares rain-fed at low density. So it's a little bit to do with the approach and the attitude of the farmer as well. Okay, that's the way that I look at it.
Thank you. Any other comments, observations? Yes.
Hi, my name is Owen Timur. I would like to just get clarity on farm models. There was mention of farm models. I'd like to know the independent variables that are being considered in that model. And secondly, since this is more of a bench study, I would like to also understand how deep the study went in terms of looking at the seed systems, looking at the markets, the availability of the markets, and the structure of the markets. And also, I would like to understand if the study as well went deeper into capacity, looking at capacities of extension services and also the capacities of the smallholder farmers and medium-sized farmers. Those are the questions.
Okay, that's a lot to look at. I think this study looked at the production system, so it was focused around what activities are done on farm to increase productivity, to increase quality. We realize that that does not work in isolation from the rest of the value chain. We have looked at the seed system, well, seed system or the nursery system. Wayne and I have done extensive work in the nursery system for macadamia in the country, so we're kind of very familiar with that. I think we flagged a couple of the issues that we see, which is decentralized, too decentralized, not commercial enough nurseries. There's too many farms trying to graft their own trees, which are very low quality, which have got kind of unclear parentage for the clones. So if you look at how other origins manage this, is they have a proper nursery registration and regulatory system. So in terms of the seed system, there is kind of an opportunity because a number of the estates who have been aggressively planting are coming towards the tail end of their establishment. They have nursery infrastructure on their farms, which have built up a lot of experience. So there is an opportunity for that. In terms of the cost of the seedling, often with smallholders, we see the cost of the seedling is a big barrier. In my view, the cost of the seedling to get it between the establishment and production, the cost of the seedling is about 1/5 of the total cost you should be putting in. So there's a question in my mind, if people can't afford seedlings, then should they be doing macadamia, because they're going to need to invest in inputs before the harvest comes? I think that's an important question. It's not an easy question to answer, but it's an important question. So in terms of seed systems, the answer is yes, very important. We're also recommending work on varieties for Malawi, which we think is really important. And actually, Wayne and I recommended this as an investment in 2012 when we did the first strategic plan for the industry. We really struggled to get it going. Wayne has done work since then on the genetics, the genetic markers, has brought in dwarfing trees. So there is work. In terms of capacity, yes, there will be a study this year on the actual workforce needs for the industry, which will look at specific skill bases and stuff, and also look at formalizing linkages with education institutions to better introduce macadamia to syllabuses and to create sustainable linkages between the industry and prospective students, research projects, this type of thing. Fact is, the industry is doubling in size. That will require twice as many technicians as are currently in the system. So it will be a big employer for skilled staff in the future. So yes, capacity is going to be in short supply. There's going to be a bit of a crunch period over the next 5 to 10 years, we think, where there will be a shortage of skills in the industry. Markets, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's been a quite significant price adjustment in macadamia over the last 18 months. This changes the economies of the value chain and the crop. Yeah, we'll be working on markets, and actually the number one priority identified by the MMA is to work on markets, look at differentiating Malawi origin from other origins, building a narrative for Malawi to kind of like protect its market share, and to find a space for this additional crop it's going to be producing. There has been work on the markets in general. We did a presentation to all the financial institutions. Well, I think 8 to 10 financial institutions a couple of weeks ago. If you're interested to knowing a bit more about the pricing and the markets, that was covered in quite a lot of detail in that presentation. So we can maybe send a link to that presentation around afterwards, which looks at global demand, global production growth over the last, I think, for the next 10 years. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I think it seems there's a lot of information that people are looking for, and building on to this research, probably we may need to have a list of such information requirements, as you have pointed out. some of the information is already available, and I think it's the issue of coordination. Where can people find all the information? Probably MMA, it's well positioned to at least be a custodian of such information and be able to send out to other people. Thank you. Any more questions? Comments? I'm mindful of the time. If there are no comments or questions, I would like to hand over to William, probably to conclude and close the session, and probably also just highlight the next steps from this session. Thank you, William. Before William will come in, let me give an opportunity to.
I don't know if the presentation can be shared to members that have covered this room. Maybe some of the basics that can transfer the information into. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, William. You also handle that question.
Thank you very much. Let me start with that question. We will be sharing the slides. So we have been, of course, getting details of everyone in the room in terms of your email and open mobile as well. But for the people that are online, in case we don't have your full details already on file, I'll just ask that maybe before we close the session, maybe you can just drop your name, email, and mobile number and organization that you're representing as well in the chat, so that at least we have all those details. And so we'll share the PowerPoint presentation from today. As Nick has mentioned, we also made a presentation to the financial institutions a couple of weeks ago. And so we'll also share that has the broader picture as well in terms of the global market and how Malawi is positioned. I think further from here, we'll be very keen to incorporate the feedback that we've got from this particular session into this paper that Wayne and Nick have developed, which has formed the basis for this presentation. So apart from the PowerPoints, of course, once we've finalized that particular paper, we will also be sharing that with you. And so we're very thankful that at least we've got your initial feedback, questions. In case we need to follow up and have some further conversations with other stakeholders, we'll also try and do that before we actually firm up and finalize with that paper. Of course, on the marketing issues, as we mentioned, as Nick was also presenting, most of these seem like they're follow-on engagement. This was mostly focused on the production system. And so as we go forward, we'll also be looking into that area a bit more. And if we need to have some further conversations as well, I'm sure that we'll regroup so that we can have those particular conversations. But for us, the results and the findings of this study are very important for our programming, as we mentioned at the start. So these will be feeding into our work program going forward. And we'll continue liaising with you, the different stakeholders, on how best, craft different pieces of engagement that are coming out of this particular study. But for us, I think it's highlighted quite some important issues. Some of them are quite urgent. And also from the discussion today, I think we've already started responding with some of them. We do look forward to working with you to make sure that we have a very comprehensive engagement that actually assists the industry develop in a coordinated way, but also in a very sustainable way going forward. So to this end, really just to thank everyone for coming. Apologies again for the very shaky start, but I guess all is well that ends well. We're happy that we've had the conversation And we're sure that this is not a one-off. It's just the start of a continuous conversation that we'll be having as we develop the industry together. So thank you very much for everyone being in the room, and also to our colleagues that joined online for also joining, and for what has been a very productive discussion. We'll look forward to keeping in touch as we take forward the steps. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, yeah, thanks everyone for spending your time with us this morning. If our discussions or ideas have sparked any ideas, or you want to get back in contact with the team, feel free to do so. We would welcome additional contact from this event. We like staying in contact with people and to build up some momentum on this. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'd like to say the industry's kind of at another point now where we've got an opportunity to make a lot of progress fairly quickly in the next few years, and I'm looking forward to that and working with people on that towards that goal. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Wayne, also for your presentations. And I think, as you've said, we'll continue keeping in touch with everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.